Strat is, I mean, if you just think of two players, for example, like if you can go from one extreme to the other, like Hank Marvin and Jimi Hendrix, kind of tells you it all, really. So you can go from that very pristine, clean sound to that kind of very wild, distorted, fuzzy sound that Jimmy used it for. And the funny thing was when Jimmy came out, he kind of made the tremolo arm fashionable again, because nobody would be seen dead with one of those at the time. When he came out, nobody would have even thought of using it the way he did it, and he was making all these incredible sounds and taking the guitar somewhere else altogether. So there's a big range of tones there, depending as well on the model and stuff, but I think just generally speaking, they kind of got it right first time. People at my sort of time of starting to play guitar in the 60s, it was Hank Marvin, really. The Shadows, he was the first guy I heard using that kind of sound, and it was unbelievable, really. When I heard it, it was kind of like, what is that? It was like the guitar sound from outer space with all the echo and everything. And I didn't know what kind of guitar he played or anything like that, but I started playing when I was 10, which was about 62. And the guy who was teaching me my first couple of chords, he took me down to the music store one day, a place called Crimbles in Belfast, and they had a pink Strat in the window just like Hank's, and he said, that's the guitar like Hank plays. And I was like, I just stared at it for ages. It was like this kind of thing from space, from another planet or something. It just looked amazing. And of course I was learning all their tunes at the time, so I was trying to kind of emulate what he was doing.
Buddy Holly, we'd seen the photograph of Buddy with this guitar that looked like a spaceship, you know, which just didn't know what it was. And so Cliff, big star, he said, we'll send, he sent to America, to California, to the Fender factory. We found out it was a Fender, for the brochure. And the brochure came back, you know. I always love, Mark Knopfler says, he saw the brochure as well. He can remember the smell of the brochure. It was just, you know, because it was that important in those days. And we were flicking through, you know, we went through the little brochure, and there was a Broadway or whatever it was, and a Telecaster, and then it came to the centre page, and there was this pink Stratocaster with a maple neck with gold-plated hardware, you know, and it was, wow. And to cut a long story short, Cliff bought it. He imported this guitar, Fender Stratocaster, for Hank to play.
Yeah, the funny thing was, and it worked out really well, that first of all, this guitar, this Strat, we could see it was the same shape as the one Buddy Holly had, so we thought, well, that's the same one. And surely James Burton uses the same guitar, because it's the most expensive one in the range. So anyway, when this thing arrived with this tremolo arm on, it had the heaviest strings you could imagine on there. You couldn't bend them. They're like horses, you know, steel horses. And I thought, particularly James Burton used to bend around a lot. Great stuff. And I genuinely thought that it must be the American diet. You know, with all this steak and eggs and milk, these guys must have incredibly powerful fingers, you see, that can bend these strings. And I genuinely believed that, because none of us had heard of light gauge strings in those days. They didn't exist in the UK. So, and it wasn't until, I don't know, a couple of years later, we found out that, in fact, he didn't use a Strat anyway. He used a Telly with extremely light strings on. But I'm glad in a way that we got the Stratocaster, because from my standpoint, that was a huge component in developing the style.
Yeah, your trademark.
The tremolo arm,
yeah.
And developing a sort of vibrato using that, because you couldn't do it in the heavy strings, and no one was doing vibratos then anyway.
Funny enough, Hank, I went to see him, must be about aged, God, it must have been about 10, I think, or 9 or 10, up in Manchester with the Shadows. And they blew me away. I mean, it's a different sound now, but at the time, his lead guitar playing was really, really out there. Very raw and aggressive compared to what was around. So it was, for me, a kind of magical sound. If you want to sum up what the Strat is, it's the only guitar that can be a bit of everything, if that makes any sense. You're not pulling it down, but if you've got to choose one guitar to give you a range of aggressive stuff, soft stuff, rhythm stuff, no other guitar does it, in my mind, like the Strat. You know, certain guitars have a certain sound, but they just do one thing. And the Strat, I think, has got such a range of sounds on it. You can be any... Well, the song I'm playing tonight, which is a sort of, kind of slightly sort of bluesy feel, I Can't Dance, which is a Genesis song, was done on the second pickup with a sort of, it's a 4x12 boogie and a Marshall amp. And you really just, I like it when you get a little edge of distortion, but not too much, not too dirty. That balance on some of those riffs is quite fine to get it right.
Around high school, I got interested in guitar, junior high school and high school. I remember Mickey and Sylvia on Ed Sullivan or Dick Clark or something like that. They had a song called Love is Strange, and he played a Strat, and that was the first Strat I really saw. And I had the Fender catalog in my textbooks in school, inside the book, so it looked like I was studying, but I was really studying the Fender catalog. When I really started heavily into the Strat was listening to the Ventures. I got a Stratocaster and we started being a Ventures band. We would play all the Ventures songs. I guess it was the Shadows over here. And I was aware of some of the Shadows stuff. And then of course the Beach Boys, Carl Wilson played a white Strat. First experience with a Stratocaster, I think I got a 63 Sunburst. I loved it so much, I was afraid to play it. I didn't want to get fingerprints on it or bump it or anything. I just spent a lot of time looking at it. And I wish I had it now. With Strat, there's just something about the design that's just, nobody's ever topped it, you know? Telecasters and Strats, just nobody's ever topped the design.
I think the initial design, it was way ahead of its time, actually, because it really hasn't dated. You know, it's become classic in many respects, but it's still just the right shape, you know. It's just the right shape, the cutaway, and I suppose it could be described as retro, you know, it could be associated with Cadillac and jukeboxes and all that kind of stuff, and in many respects it is, but it never loses its kind of hipness, does it? You know, I mean, you know, it was the Shadows were playing it for a while there, you know, and they were playing it in a certain style, and then Hendrix came and freaked it out completely, you know what I mean, and took it to a different place, and it's still got the capacity to do that. It depends on the individual themselves. Like you can really express yourself with this guitar, I do believe. 57 Shure mic that I always liked as well, and it has that same sort of quality of being all-purpose and very robust. You can take it on the road, you can drop it, it's still going to work for you. You know, it's a very strong workhorse, but it's more than that because it's got soul. It's got a kind of personality, and the more you play any guitar, the more you get into the individuality of that guitar. Style, actually it is. You know, you can get that nice clean sound. I mean, I'm not actually a guitarist, I have to point out. You know, but I usually go for a clean sound when I'm writing, you know. It's even something like Seagull. You know, just like that, it's almost an acoustic effect. That's another thing with these things, you can play them without being plugged in. And then you don't annoy the neighbours, you see. And then you can turn it up and really annoy the neighbours if you so choose. That kind of versatility I like.
This really is where it all started, isn't it? You know, with Mr. Leo Fender designing a guitar that would not feed back, ironically enough, you know, and it became in the hands of Hendrix and Jeff Beck many years later the item which did feed back, but in the right way. You get 3 pickups here, and depending on where the pickup is underneath the string, you're going to hear different sounds. Like, imagine your ear underneath this string. If you're near the bridge, you're going to pick up a lot of high harmonics, a lot of quite harsh stuff. So if we just listen to this pickup, it's quite harsh, which is well known, the bridge pickup. If you go to the next pickup, this one, just on its own, which you do with this selector switch, the Fender selection switch, you get a slightly more mellow sound. And then you go to this one, the fingerboard pickup, and by now your ear, if you like, is underneath the part of the string which is vibrating the most, and the fundamental, the lowest note is dominant, so you don't get so much of this harshness, you get quite a sweet sound. So quite a lot of difference from that to... And then you have a couple of little intermediate positions. Now Fenders didn't used to have this, and people found this by accident. You see, I'm not an expert, but this is what happened. You know, nowadays they make them with a little click position, so you can have this pickup and this pickup together, and it gives you a different tonal variation because you're mixing harmonics. This is bridge. This is that one, and this is in between. Has a sort of cluck to it, which is very attractive, you know, and a lot of people have used that to advantage, including Clapton, including Hendrix.
Whoever designed this, you know, the first design, there was nothing wrong with it. It was absolutely perfect. You know, it's what, you know, they could have made just one guitar shape. We have the others, and they're all kind of very nice, but this is it. First big tour I ever did in the band called Amen Corner, Jimi Hendrix is top of the bill. Now up until then people have done things with a guitar, but you see Jimi Hendrix live, at 17 or 18 I was, I'm sitting there at the sound check going, what the hell is going on? You know, and it's raw. We're not talking about process, it's not stuck through something with effects. The guy moved air. He was loud, he was naturally loud. It's people. You know, Hank, give it to Hank. Hank makes Hank sounds. Give it to Albert. Albert, you know, that's the real strength of a player. For me, is if you can make it speak for you, the same thing, Mark Knopfler does it, Ray Cooder does it, I'm working at it.
I soon realised that the things I was listening to, I really liked that single coil sound, you know. And I was really into James Burton, and of course a huge Buddy Holly fan, you know. So I got a telly first. I got a telly in '63, and I had a Strat for a little while, but I didn't feel comfortable with it for some reason. I felt more comfortable with a telly, and then I forgot about Strat for a long time, you know, until probably 10, 12 years later. I was by that time I was living in the States, and I always wanted a 50 Strat like Buddy Holly's, you know, and it just so happened that we had a whole truckload of equipment stolen with Emmylou Harris. I lost all our guitars and amps and everything, so we pooled our resources to buy us new instruments, you know. And I thought, well, what would I like, you know? Maybe I'll get that 50 Strat. So I went looking for one, and I found a 58 Strat for about $800, you know. So that was the going price then, yeah. And I still have that. It's just a great guitar. I like the neck sound, you know, that's kind of a Hendrix and Stevie Ray. You know. And if you split those two like that, it's a bit sweeter. Kind of, you know, I use that sound a lot with when I play. And the middle sounds more of a bell-like quality, you know, and Buddy Holly used that a lot, you know. It's that classic Buddy Holly sound, and he used that middle pickup a lot, you know. These two together is a favourite by, you know, with a lot of guitar players, and Eric uses that all the time, you know. And the back pickup on its own is, you know, it's more of a twangy sound. What a design, you know, 1950. Well, I'm sure the rock and roll thing was by accident because he was a country music fan. You know, he used to make his guitar and made his tellies, and he took them round to the bars and gave them to the country players, you know. And it was only later that you know, guys started using them for blues and rock and roll. You know, that certainly wasn't in his mind, you know. But people saw something they liked. Yeah, that's cool, you know. And especially, you know, the Strat. You know, it's such a cool looking thing, and it still is. You know, it's an icon.